Alarming new evidence tonight of widespread fraud in a federal government program designed to give money to small businesses.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
A new report out tonight says billions of dollars in federal contracts meant to help small businesses are actually being awarded to some of the largest corporations in the world.
In conclusion, our work continues to show that SBA is not very good at fraud prevention and enforcement.
Lloyd Chapman, founder of the American Small Business League, says it's a national problem.
It's not miscoding, it's intentional, and that in many cases it's outright federal contracting frauds.
Given the agency's management problems,
Fraud, waste, and abuse in federal contracting.
The government is dropping the ball on this.
In many cases it's fraud.
Fraud.
Democrats on Capitol Hill were suggesting a new name for his agency.
Fraud.
Maybe something like the Big Business Administration. This is fraud. This is fraud. This is fraud. Allowing huge corporations to grab contracts that are meant for small business.
Is there some ways, some fraud? There's been rampant, fraud and abuse.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
Do these look like small businesses to you?
Fraud.
Or these?
Fraud.
Well, they did to the government, which handed out fat contracts that were supposed to, by law, to go to small businesses.
So why are you reducing the agency's commitment to this proven fraud prevention tool?
What shocks me is it's still going on.
The program is rigged with fraud, abuse, and mismanagement.
Fraud, waste, and abuse. Fraud, waste, and abuse. Fraud, waste, and abuse.
That up to $400 million a day in federal contracts earmarked for small businesses had been diverted to Fortune 500 corporations.
Vulnerable to fraud and abuse. Specifically, SBA's validation controls failed.
It's not random occurrences.
Fraud.
Fraud. This is fraud.
Top 100 recipients of federal small business contracts, 70 are large businesses.
Our past investigations show that fraud and abuse were a significant problem.
And change is very difficult.
Reports and investigations have been surfacing in the last couple of years that have exposed the inside workings of a fraudulent system.
Inaccuracies in federal small business contracting data.
And change is very difficult.
Fraud in the 8A and Hub Zone programs and other SBA preferential contracting programs is also a problem.
The SBA Inspector General has said for 5 consecutive years that the number one problem at the SBA is the fact that Fortune 500 firms are getting all the money that by law should be going to the middle class.
This is fraud.
This is extremely disturbing.
The U.S. Small Business Administration has known about this for years.
I don't have any direction about this effort.
13 federal and 2 private investigations found evidence of fraud and abuse in federal contracting.
Fraud.
The diversion of up to $100 billion a year in federal small business contracts to large businesses.
it is then troubling to find out that the program is subject to fraud.
GAO help us identify considerable fraud.
So many government contracts intended for small firms are going instead to some of the biggest corporate names in America.
The Inspector General of the Small Business Administration has called the problem the most serious management and performance challenge facing the SBA.
Felony federal contracting fraud.
Fraud and abuse.
Fraud and abuse.
Fraud and abuse.
Widespread fraud.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
This is fraud.